All right, everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We've got a packed agenda, so we're going to try and cover a lot of topics, a lot of ground really fast. Before we get to that, I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So feel free to get up, stretch your legs, go to the restroom, grab some extra food, grab some handouts, and all that. While we're up here speaking, we don't have any breaks programmed into the agenda. You're not going to hurt my feelings at the very least. And just a quick rundown of the presentations we're going to have. First off, I'm going to be talking to y'all about the Edisto Island Land Trust Septic program. We have Dr. Pettay and Dr. Amanda Guthrie here to talk about their research here on Edisto Island. We got B. Calhoun with Clemson Extension, who's going to be speaking about the Septic Safe program. We've got Josh Campbell from South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium, who's going to speak to us about oysters and harvest regulations. We have Zach Snipes with Shoreline Restoration Group, who's going to be speaking to us about native shorelines and native plants. And we have Ellen, come on, my lawn that you got. Who's going to be speaking to us about rain gardens as well as native plants. And I'm Tom Austin. I'm the Director of Land Conservation for the Edisto Island Land Trust. I head up our water quality programs, and I will be the moderator for tonight, which means I'll be fixing things when they break. But first things first, I want to tell you a little bit about the Land Trust. We are your local land trust. We've been operating for 30 years. This is our 30th anniversary this year, and our mission is to preserve the rural quality of life on Edisto Island by protecting our lands, waterways, scenic vistas, and heritage through conservation and education. And that waterways component was added to our mission in 2019. Because even though Edisto Island is 50% protected, and we're part of the Yates Basin, and we have outstanding resource waters, we still have significant water quality issues here. And those water quality issues have impacts not just to our wildlife and to our natural ecosystems, but they come with associated human health risks as well. And with that, it also results in regulatory agencies closing down access to natural resources. That then means that we can't utilize those natural resources for the traditions that are important to our culture here as Edistonians. So with that said, in 2019, we went out looking for answers. We met Dr. Scaroni, who worked with us in 2022 to publish the Edisto Island Watershed-based plan. And that plan describes the issues that we have here on the island in detail. It identifies the likeliest pollution sources on the island, and it suggests solutions on how we can go about remedying those issues. The two biggest issues that we have on the island are excessive turbidity and bacteria pollution. Because 70% of our creeks on Edisto Island are impaired with fecal coliform bacteria. That's not good. And this map that I have up here on the screen is showing the shellfish beds that are either closed or restricted to public shellfish harvest due to these excessive levels of fecal coliform bacteria in our waterways. And with those elevated bacteria levels in the waterways, that comes with human health risks as well. Everyone who's out there fishing, crabbing, shrimping, harvesting oysters, boating, swimming, there is an increased risk that they will contract some sort of infectious disease from the waterways. It's not bad 100% of the time all year round, but kind of the maximum threshold is beyond what is safe all times of the year. And this also results in increased swim advisories for the beach as well. It's the same principle. High turbidity has some nuanced impacts to wildlife that can cause trophic cascades in small ways. It can have impacts on our salt marsh and our estuary systems, which are the nursery grounds for our commercial fisheries. So small changes in turbidity can result in larger changes in the ecosystem that are very hard to predict and track. It can also be a sign of eroding marshes, which is not good for the health of the marsh as well, and it's not good for the oysters that live on the banks of the marsh that clean our waterways. So with that said, what is the cause of this? Well, bacterial pollution only comes from one place. It's people and animals. And there's no big pipe in the middle of the island somewhere that we can just put a cork in and solve all of our issues. There's nothing that we can just point at and say, get an EPA and just solve all of our problems overnight. It doesn't exist. This is a cumulative issue that is compounding across the entire island. And if we look at our undeveloped creeks, back here on the eastern side of the island, over on the Sella Creek and Steamboat Creek, as you can see, there's not any impairments over there. So it's more than likely not just the natural wildlife that's on the landscape. That makes sense. Natural systems have natural checks and balances that purify water, passively. They're able to sustain a certain load. And if we look at places where we're artificially concentrating wildlife, like duck fields, those are really up here in this red area of the creek, which is more so the brackish region of the South Edisto River, where it's just not safe to harvest oysters because of the variable water quality and salinity. So it doesn't appear to be wildlife that are the cause of this issue. At the same time, we don't have any high-density agricultural operations. There's no feedlots. I don't even think there's 100 cows on the entire island. And that same thing applies to horses and cattle, or horses and goats and sheep. Probably not 100, probably not 200 hoofed animals on the entire island, which just leaves people as being the most likely issue. And if we look at housing density on Edisto Island, there's about 2,400 homes, 2,400 residences, which at the very least there's 2,400 mailing addresses because I sent out 2,428 postcards for this workshop, so I know that for a fact. And that's not a tremendous density on the island. That's only one house per 16 acres when we look at the whole of Edisto Island. And even looking at the beach, it's only about one house per 2 acres when you boil it down there, which is not that tremendous of a density. And at the same time, there's probably only one dog per household on average, so it's probably not pets either. So what is the cause of this then? It's septic systems, more than likely. We're still trying to confirm and deny that in which creeks these are actually the issue, but I'm convinced that that is the major issue that we are experiencing here on the island. Because all of Edisto Island relies on septic systems. And on the beach, only 40% of residences have access to the municipal sewer system, and most of those are either apartments, condos, or businesses. So about 90% of actual single-family homes on the beach are still on septic systems. Don't check my napkin map, I'm still working on that. But when a septic system works, and this is something I need to stress, is it doesn't cause any significant issues. These aren't, bad boogeymen we need to get rid of. When a septic system works, it works. It doesn't cause pollution. But if that system is sited poorly, if it's damaged, or if it has completely failed, it can pump gallons a day of raw wastewater into surface waters that can then contaminate our creeks. And a few systems here and there on the island failed isn't a community-wide issue, but if a double-digit percentage of systems are damaged or failing across the island, that's a big issue for everyone. It's island-wide and it affects all of us. That's why it's so important to do septic system maintenance. Because we don't think about septic systems until they break. And we need to change that as a community, because a failed system is bad for your wallet and it's bad for our waterways. If you don't do regular maintenance, your system is more likely to fail catastrophically because you don't catch small issues before they magnify or get amplified into a complete system failure. And I'm not going to point fingers either, because I was in the same boat 5 years ago. My 65-year-old septic tank failed completely and utterly, and we hadn't looked at the thing in over 15 years, probably 20, 25 years. So this is something that impacts all of us. It's something that the vast majority of us have experienced at some point in time, and if we want to see water quality improvement on the island, we need to all collectively do our share in fixing water quality. That's why we organize this workshop, to get all of us on the same page about what each of us can do individually to help work towards improvements in our water quality across our community. Because we each manage our own septic system, and we are each responsible in some small part for our water quality across the island. And our actions or our inactions have impacts not just to us, but to everyone else who lives here and everyone else who utilizes the waterways in some way, shape, or form. That's why in 2022 we started the Septic System Improvement Program for the island. We did our pilot program in 2022. We were able to inspect 15 systems, and of those, 10 systems needed to be repaired. That's 67%, and one of those needed to be completely replaced. And that highlighted to us as an organization that septic systems were an issue. We didn't quite know how much of an issue, but they were in fact part of the problem. In 2024, we were able to come back bigger and better with a much larger program at about 10 times the funding. And so we were able to do a second wave of repairs, and we inspected 50 systems. 45 of them had to be fixed in some capacity. That's 90% of the systems we looked at were broken in some way, shape, and form. 23 of those 45 had to be completely replaced from stem to stern. That is 50% of what we looked at, 45% of every system that was inspected. That's huge. That's a problem. That's a big problem. And again, we only looked at 50 systems. About 2,400 residences on the island. So who knows how huge of an issue this might be. In this program, or this workshop here today, is the close of our 2024 program, but it's not going to be the end of our water quality work. We're going to continue incorporating this into our outreach work for the rest of 2025 going forward until we have these water quality issues under control, and then we'll keep doing that so ad nauseum in perpetuity into the future to make sure that we don't lose the ground that we have been able to make there. And we hope to relaunch this program bigger and better in 2026, make it more efficient, make it more impactful, and we hope that some of the ongoing research that's happening today in the Edisto Island watershed will be able to help better inform and help us prioritize the work that we're doing to make sure that we get the most bang for our buck and that we have the most impact to as many people as possible across the island. And if you want to learn more about the water quality work that we're doing, you're in the right place. And I would urge you before you leave today to make sure that you grab a copy of all the flyers that are out here today. It's great reading material. Grab some stickers, put it on your car, put it on your golf cart, put it on your lawnmower, do some guerrilla advertising for me. And if you want to learn some more in a little bit deeper detail, you can go to our website at edisto.org/waterquality. And if you want to reach out to us directly at the Land Trust, there's my information. I've got my business cards over there. I'd be happy to talk to you. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Ty Pettay, who's going to talk to you about some really exciting research that's going on here in the watershed to get to the source of our bacteria issues.
Hello everyone, sorry about that. My name is Ty Pettay. I'm a professor at US EPA, so USC Beaufort. I'm going to talk a little bit about a project we have going on that's funded by Sea Grant. I apologize for those first few slides. There's supposed to be two of us up here. Amy Scaroni, who's actually the lead PI, the principal investigator on this project, was in a bit of a fender bender from all the way down from Charleston, so I'm covering her part too. So I've never seen these slides before, so I'm going to make it up as I go along. But I have a good idea of what we're doing with this project, so it should be okay. So Amy, as Tom mentioned, Amy was asked to put together a watershed action plan for Edisto watershed, right? And so they finished that. Was that 2022? Is that what you said, Tom? And two of the main findings from that action plan was, as Tom mentioned too, that there is potential turbidity impairments in the South Edisto River, and then numerous bacterial impairments that affect recreational, but probably more importantly, shellfish collections around Edisto watershed. And so, let's see if I can. So Amy's with Clemson, I'm with USC Beaufort, and so here's the watershed plan that they put together. If you haven't seen this, it's freely available online through Sea Grant's website. Yeah, Sea Grant has this online where you can see the detailed analysis they did for water quality around the Edisto watershed. So, with the findings that Amy had from this action plan, as I mentioned, I'll just use my mouse. Can you guys see the mouse out there? No. Can you hear me if I yell? Yeah. All right. Yeah, cool. All right. So here's the watershed that they collected all the data that was available to find out what potential water quality problems were going on here. The South Edisto, these blue dots are turbidity. Anybody know what turbidity is? Yeah, so turbidity is, from the most simplistic, is how clear your water is. Estuaries around here naturally have turbid waters, right? So there's stuff floating around. That could be sediment, so it could be more geological in origin, or it could be biological. Things like bacteria or even algae, which are natural to the system, but they just cause that water to be browner or grainer and more turbid. You know, very different than the crystal clear blue waters you see in the Caribbean islands, for example, right? Those waters have no turbidity. We have high turbidity. But the Edisto River, for whatever reason, and what we're trying to investigate is why are these levels more elevated than would be expected. And so part of this project, and I'm helping to collect these samples, but I'm not really doing the turbidity side of the project. I'm doing the bacteria side. The turbidity side is, let's figure out, is it geological in origin? So is it particulates from the earth that are floating around, or is it biological? So is it algae or bacteria or something else that's floating around in the water column? So that's what we're doing with the Edisto River. And then we have a second set of samples that we're collecting more in the interior of the island where we have bacterial impairments. So all the red dots are showing red, even these, again, what is that, magenta? The red ones are shellfish beds that have impairments because of fecal coliform. So the state measures fecal coliform on a monthly basis, and then over time they can get, they have set numbers, so the total amount of bacteria floating around in the water that are used to say shellfish are safe to eat or they're not safe to eat, right? And then we have similar levels for recreational purposes too. Obviously, if you're eating something, you have a better chance of getting sick than if you're just swimming. But if you're swimming or eating other animals, then you can potentially ingest those bacteria also. So we have these are our main sample sites. We're coming out on a monthly basis. We started back in June, I believe, is when we started the project. And so we come out on a monthly basis, collected all these, well, she doesn't have it divided. I'll show you a map in a minute. Some of these shellfish beds, we own, or these bacteria sites, we only collect on a quarterly basis just from a time and money standpoint. But we have roughly 7 sites on the South Edisto that we collect on a monthly basis and 6 sites internally, and then quarterly we add another 6 or 8 sites, I forget the exact numbers, to look at bacteria around the watershed just to get better geographic cover. Yeah, so this is similar to the map that Tom was just showing. Sorry, I told you I haven't seen these slides before, so I gotta figure out what I'm supposed to talk about. The red are the restricted areas. So if we kind of go back and forth, you can see the red here. You know, we're sampling in these waterways where there are impairments for bacteria in addition to the turbidity impairments that are going on up here. And so obviously, when it comes to the bacteria and shellfish harvesting, shell fisheries are an important part of our culture and what we eat down here in the Southeast, right? And so if your shellfish beds are closed, then that's a significant hit both to the economy and the culture to us around here. And so what we're hoping to do with this project is figure out, one, where the turbidity impairments are coming from so you can make land management decisions if that's possible. And then 2, for the bacterial impairments, as Tom was mentioning, figure out where the bacteria is coming from. We're not going to find, like he said, one big pipe where it's all coming from. In this watershed, it's non-point source solution or pollution coming from all over the place. But if we can better track down where we think it's coming from, then we can fix septic tanks if that's the problem, or come up with other ways to mitigate and prevent the bacteria from coming in and polluting the waters that you won't use. And so again, I'm not going to say much about the septic. I think Tom did a good job of covering all that. Septic, I'll repeat what he said though. Septics are not bad things. When they are functioning properly, they do what they're supposed to do. They're not polluting waterways, but you can have problems with aging infrastructure, and so they can begin to leak. You can have full-scale failure. Another problem that is beginning to happen as sea level rises is you have that water table is changing, and so now what may be a functional septic tank in the past is becoming non-functional because the water table is increasing. And it's not just here this is happening, it's happening everywhere. We have the same problem down at Beaufort. Bluffton, for example, town of Bluffton's had a huge push to repair and even replace or do central sewer to get rid of septic systems in an effort to reduce their bacteria load. Okay, I'm going to skip that too, sorry. You're going to be talking about some of this. Yeah. So I'm not going to step on their toes, especially since I don't know what Amy was going to say. But obviously, again, repeating what Tom was talking about, a big push around here is to monitor these septic systems, see if they need some repair, and if so, help fix that. And I think you are getting money to help assist all of you do that, because it's not a cheap thing to do. So this takes us to the research, and so what I'm going to focus on, this is Amy's slide, but I think my slide may be next. So as I mentioned, we've been going on a monthly basis on the Edisto, South Edisto, and around Edisto Island, collecting water samples. We take basic environmental parameters, temperature, salinity, pH, dissolved oxygen, and then we grab water samples in little different sized bottles. Some of this will be looking at nutrients, so nitrogen and phosphorus in the water. That's particularly important, particularly for the turbidity side. If we decide, the data shows that it's biological in origin, it's most likely algae that are growing and that's causing it. And so is there excess nutrients coming in that is promoting algal growth? And when I say nutrients, this is like fertilizers that you throw in your garden or your lawn. Algae in the water use those same nitrogen and phosphorus to grow too, right? So we're doing nutrients back at the lab, and then we're collecting several different samples for bacteria too. Now I know what I'm talking about. Let's skip ahead real quick to bacteria. So when you talk about bacteria impairments, what the state does and what the country does is you go out and we look for what are called fecal indicator bacteria. In this case, the ones we're looking at are Enterococcus and E. coli, and then the state commonly uses a group called fecal coliform. These bacteria typically by themselves aren't necessarily dangerous to your health. E. coli, some of them can be, but what they are is they are commonly found in the waste of warm-blooded mammals and birds. And so if you find these at high levels in your water, then you know you have fecal contamination. What you really worry about are diseases that are carried in with the feces. I know, a very nice topic to talk about. My background is actually phytoplankton and algae, and so I never thought I was going to be getting into working on fecal research, but I now have a freezer full of poop and and you'll understand why in a second. It's not because I like it. So as a quick and easy monitoring method, you can go out, grab a water sample. There's several different methods. We use this one that's made by this company. It's called IDEX. Basically, this is like a petri dish that you may remember from high school or college where you're growing bacteria. You put in a nutrient broth that the bacteria like. You incubate it overnight for 16 to 24 hours. You pull it back out. This particular one has been engineered to where either E. coli or Enterococcus munch on these nutrients in here. When they do, it releases this compound that will glow under UV light. So what I'm showing here is, here's your plate. You mix your water with your nutrients, you pour it in. There's a fancy little plate sealer, like you're shrink wrapping something that seals it tight so air can't get in. You put it in the incubator overnight, then you pull it out, you put it underneath the black light, and it glows. And you can see, I don't know how easy it's to see in the back, but you have 48 big and then 24 small wells. And they have a little key where you count your wells and how many wells you have. It tells you what your concentration is within a given area range, right? And so the state does something similar. It's not the same method, but they use fecal coliform for the most part for shellfish beds. But Enterococcus can be used. It's used commonly for recreational purposes along with E. coli. Enterococci are what are used for your beach bacteria samplings, if you've ever seen those occurring. But anyways, we can measure bacteria concentrations in our water column. So these are good indicators that you may have fecal material coming into your water body, but they don't tell you where it's coming from, right? This is not restricted to human. So this could be a bunch of dog crap on the side of the river that washes in, and then you wound up culturing bacteria from dogs and not humans, right? It could be horse, it could be wildlife. And so what we are doing now is, and the reason I got involved, is we can do this technique called bacterial source tracking, where now we can use genetic tools and we specifically look for bacteria that are not 100%, but fairly specific to a particular group of animals. So we go after bacteria that are specifically found in the human gut. We can go after bacteria that are specifically found in dogs, horses, deer, cow, birds, and that sort of thing. So what that allows us to do is not just say, yeah, you have a bunch of bacteria in there, so we need to watch out for this water body. It may not be safe to eat these, but you can now begin to make land management decisions. And of course, the most dangerous fecal material in the water is going to be humans, because those are the diseases we're most likely to pick up. Can we get diseases from other animals? Yes, but more likely you're going to get disease from human to human, right? So we are using genetics now. And this is the map I was looking for before. These yellow dots are our turbidity samples. The blue dots are our monthly bacteria samples, and the purple ones are we add 4 times a year. And So we go back, we do the general bacteria sampling to see how much fecal indicator bacteria we find, and then we extract DNA. We filter that water down onto a filter, extract bacterial DNA, and then do the genetics to look and see what animal this bacteria may be coming from. And so, you know, the benefit of this is if it's human, then particularly in this case, since we don't have centralized sewer, it's not a leaky pipe, it's going to be something to do with septic, something, right? And so if you do this enough sampling over a long enough period of time, you can begin to pinpoint areas that are hot spots, and then you can focus on where that bacteria may be coming from, and then you can focus your efforts on repairing their septic systems. If it's wildlife in origin, I don't know what your answer is. I don't think you can go out there and kill all the deer or wading birds, but it lets you know from a land management decision where you're going to get, right? If it's dogs, some of the work we do often appears to be dogs, then maybe you want to be more forceful about picking up after the dog. But it gives you, it's another tool to figure out what's going on in your waterways and why your shellfish beds are currently impaired. I was going to go into this more. I don't want to get too much in the weeds because most of you probably don't care a whole lot. But the way we do this is everyone has DNA inside them. Everyone has a genetic code that defines who you are from a biochemical basis. Bacteria are the same way. And so they have a genetic code. We can design these little things called primers, which are just basically man-made genetic codes that bind specifically to specific bacteria species or strains. So just like we do the same thing and amplify DNA from a dog versus a person, you can design primers that only pick up genes in dogs and they won't work on DNA with humans. We can do the same thing with bacteria. So we throw these primers into a little tiny tube that we call a master mix, throw it on this machine, which is a qPCR thermocycler. All this thing really does is a fancy heating block. It gets hot and cold, hot and cold. But that allows the chemistry inside the tube to create more and more copies of the DNA that we're looking for if it's there. And then you can run these standard curves, and that's what I'm showing you. This is what the raw data kind of looks like. You end up with a standard curve where you have high concentrations of that bacteria DNA and low concentrations, and so you can actually quantify how much bacteria you have in that sample. And if you don't get a hit, or you don't get any amplification, there's no bacteria in there, then you assume that that bacteria is not there, or it's at a low enough concentration that you can't pick it up, right? So, going back to my freezer full of poop, this is what we do. You have these markers. So most of these markers, these primers, are made by other labs, and so we're just borrowing them and using them too. But in your watershed, you want to test them on positive controls. And so we have slowly been collecting samples from all different types of animals to try these and show that, hey, they only work on humans, or they only work on dogs, and they don't amplify something else. Because you don't want to have positive hits for dog, and it turns out it was human, right? You want to know that your data is good. And so this is what we've been working on, and we're trying to develop more markers. Right now we're using human as an EPA-approved marker. That cow is or is about to become EPA-approved. So we have human, cow, horse, deer, and dog. We're working on, and bird. We have a general bird one that works. It's not as good as I like, so we're trying to get some other ones to work. It works well with like chickens, but not for some reason it doesn't pick up geese. So we're working on that. And then town of Bluffton, I should give them a shout out, that's why I have their down here. We have a water quality lab at USCD, and town of Bluffton and Beaufort County have been huge and instrumental in building that lab. And so they actually bought the equipment so we could do this monitoring in the Bay River. They bought these machines for us to do the work that we're actually doing here now too. So yeah, we're now testing and cat. We have feral cat populations in the watershed there, so they're interested to see if some of their bacteria are problems. Because the Bay River, just like here, has major oyster industry, but they've had bacteria concentrations that are going up higher and higher for the past 20 years or so. So they're trying to figure out what they need to do from a land management decision also. I'll skip the data here. And I'll just leave it here. USCD is a undergraduate institution, and so all the work we do heavily relies on undergraduate students coming along and helping us. And here are 2 students that have been helping out with this project here in Edisto. And so they've been coming down with us every month since last summer to help us collect samples, and they process these samples back to the lab too. Good? Did I get you along? I normally do.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Especially for the slide roulette of figuring out what's happening. So, hello everyone. My name is Guthrie. I am with South Carolina Sea Grant. We've heard a little bit about that. So, what is Sea Grant? I'll get to that first. We are a state-federal partnership, but we are primarily a state agency, and we help translate the science. So not only do we fund research, a lot of the work that I do is more in that engagement, talking with residents, talking with community leaders, talking with local government officials, and having them understand what the science is and how we go from there. So I'm going to be talking about a new and upcoming project. So my slides will be more forward-looking rather than ties was presenting the work. So our title is The Risk, Impacts, and Strategies for Coastal Communities. We always call it risk, so I actually don't know what these words are. Advancing convergent science to support climate change, adaptation, and resilience. Basically, risk. We'll go for that. What is this project? So we are collaborating. So we, as in South Carolina Sea Grant, we're working in Edisto Island, which includes for us, Edisto Beach. We're collaborating with Delaware and Rhode Island to understand how we can all address climate change in our 3 different communities. And the really main focus is to advance the science to empower the local communities so people can make informed decisions to move forward with that. There are 7 particular objectives within this large project. It is a 4-year project that we just started this past August. But the first objective, and probably the most important objective, is that we want to collaborate with the communities. We want to make sure that this research is informed by and collected with in conjunction with our communities. The second objective here is assessing that groundwater piece. So this is also going to touch on the septic world. So one of the reasons why your groundwater is a challenge with septic systems is when you have elevated groundwater, that can be contributing to the outflow of the septic functioning. So that's going to be a piece of that. We did a very similar project about that in Beaufort already. We finished it up this past fall. So I do have a little bit of flyer. We are back in that far corner here. So if you want to see the results of that, come get the flyer. We also, the other objectives that we're looking at is the, skip to number 2, the flooding vulnerability and flood mitigation. So looking at flooding overall. So recognizing that we have both above and below ground flooding, the economic impacts. What does that mean in terms of jobs? What does it mean in terms of livability? What does it mean in terms of general finances for the area? And how is that going to be affected under different climate scenarios? Understanding how people are making these decisions. So surveying our local decision makers. What are they doing? And then providing decision support tools. So after we have all this information, how do we give it back? How do we provide that information so it's usable and not just kept in the world of the sciences? And the 7th objective, which is one of my favorite objectives, we've been doing a lot of education work. So we have people on staff. They're going to be creating educational modules for high school and undergraduate students. But one of the coolest things is we have a film crew. So the film is going to be interviewing residents, interviewing researchers, and for the 3 different areas and telling the story. So this film crew has already created a film called Salted Earth. It's about 22 minutes long. We're expecting the film for our project to be very similar. So very unique way of sharing this. I'm excited for doing that work. So as I said, we are working with 3 different states, but who is that with us in South Carolina? So we're primarily working with the College of Charleston. So we have Dr. Norma Levine, Dr. Kendra Stewart, and Dr. William Veal. At the top row there, we have Alicia Wilson, who is our hydrologist at the University of South Carolina. We have Dr. Tess Belfinger and Dr. Scott Curtis at the Citadel. You have me at South Carolina Sea Grant and my colleague, Shumei Wang, who are working. Shumei is our GIS specialist, and then also in collaboration with others. As you said, we want to be community informed. So we have the Land Trust is on our community advisory board, and then others from the town of Edisto Beach. And we're working to expand that also to include emergency managers, as you know, a big concern for the area is also flooding. And what does it mean for the road one way in, one way out? So with that, I'm going to conclude. I have a brief flyer about the information, and as I said, we're just getting started. This is a 4-year project, and we really want to be engaged with the community. So if you want to know more about the project, ever want to learn anything about what's going on, if you want to be invited to any of our other future events, please sign up. We'd love to have you come. Some of the events you're going to have to be paid for. It's dependent on the event. We're going to have focus groups and other things like that, and we want to compensate you for your knowledge and time for that. With that, pass it over to Beatriss. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Beatriss Calhoun, also known as B. I'm a water resource agent at Clemson Extension, and I'm also part of the Ashley Cooper Consortium. It's like a group of partners of municipalities that we help them with educational information and outreach. And septic is a big topic, so I'm going to start off with a question to make sure I cover what is needed for the audience. So when I talk about septic, does anyone feel comfortable saying that they know how a septic system works? Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to talk?
Anyone who feels comfortable saying, like, knowing what a
So
system
you flush your toilet after you go, and it goes into a tank, and I believe the solid waste kind of precipitates out, and wet water goes out into a drainage field, and it works by just like stalling for a long time, and some bacteria do some things, and then the water's clear and eventually sinks out.
Yeah, that's it.
That's my general understanding.
Does everyone kind of agree with that understanding? So that's basically what it is. So I don't have to go in full detail with that, and now save me some time. But like she said, it comes from your house, not just from your bathroom. It can come from your kitchen. It can come from your washroom. It can come from a utility sink. All those things get flushed down, then it lands into a tank where she says it stalls, and it sits and separates out. And then it goes down to your drain field, and then there's engineered soil underneath, and that engineered soil allows it to saturate and clean it in a way. That's your treatment center. It's almost like how a sewage system works, but it's just in the backyard. So we get a closer look at the tank that you have. So the tank, like she said, you have your sludge is at the bottom. Your sludge is your solid waste. I don't have to go into details of what solid waste is. And then you have your top is scum. That's the stuff that floats on the top. That's your fats, oils, and grease. We don't want that in your tank that much. So you want to limit that as much as you can. And then in the middle is your wastewater. So that's the liquid stuff. That's what kind of, everything filters out, and they call it another term, effluent. And that's what flows down to your drain field. The other stuff does not flow down to your drain field. That's what needs to be pumped out. So they separate out. So your drain field just has the liquids, and then you get the scum and the sludge pumped out. That helps, because septic is something. So with that, your septic system can be designed in multiple different ways. Depending on your location, that's how your septic system is going to be set up. So you can have a septic system that's above the ground. You can have a septic system that's buried underneath. That's how we mostly have it now, but as we're hearing, our groundwater is rising. So we may have to adjust to the above the ground septic system in the future. These are things that we're learning as we go with this. So it can be different materials that your tank is made out of too. It can be concrete, it can be a polymer material. Different things are used in different locations. So your location matters. Let's see, I have notes here to make sure I don't miss anything. So we talked about how it separates down. A septic system can be found in a city limit. So even if you like, man, there's too many houses around here to have a septic system in my backyard. Surprise, surprise, there could be a septic system. So checking and making sure that you are sewage versus septic is very important. You can't just blindly think just because the area is one way. As we see how development happens, there used to be an area where there was one home. And now that area, if you go down Charleston, 5 homes are now in that area. So kind of think of it like that. Not every place was set as a city. It started someplace else. So locating your septic is the biggest part of a septic system, knowing where it is. We don't have a septic contractor to talk, so I might put a little bit of things in that he may speak of. When they get on that site, you wanna know where your location is so you can save time. Sometimes a septic visit can be 2 hours, or it could be more if they have to find and probe. And that's more money that goes into it as well, because they wanna be paid for their time. So going ahead, if you're buying a new home, if you are a homeowner already with one, knowing where your septic system is located, flagging it off, it just saves you steps. And then also, I kind of acronymed it PIMP. I mean, you can take that how you want, but your first step, you gotta protect it. I grew up on septic. My dad was heavy on me about our septic system. It was in the backyard, and I'm a country girl with a truck. I would drive through that backyard, and he would always be on me because the septic drain field was in that area. So knowing the location, if you don't know the location, you don't know how to protect it. Second is inspecting it. You need to take a look outside of your area. There's a lot of signs that can be notified to you before it even happens. Smells, cooling of water if there's no rain. You're like, oh, it's squishy here, and it hasn't been raining in a little bit of time. That could be your septic. You smell something, things like that helps you get ahead of the game of if you're having a failure, if you're having an issue, because they all cost. So you want to be proactive in it. I kind of skipped one. And then the next one is maintaining it. When you are able to find it, you're able to protect it, you're also able to maintain it. You're able to go out there, check what you can check, see if the grass has changed color in a certain area. That means nutrients is being pushed into your grass area. Where's that nutrients coming from? It would be your septic. So all these things help you find out how to save money and also protect the environment at the same time. I always think of the cost. As a community, we want to protect the environment, but a dollar, it's hard to do it when you don't have a lot of dollars to do it with. So we want to make sure you're ahead of the game, that way you don't have to pull so much out of your pocket. All right, well, with septic system lifespan, most of the time they can live up to 15, and new research is showing that it can live up to 60 years. So you can have a septic system for 60 years. But knowing where it's located first, maintaining it properly, that keeps it in that 60-year mark. If you're running your septic system hard, and I'm talking about you flushing whatever you want down the drain, you're allowing your garbage disposal to flush all through to your septic system. You got wads, you remember 2020 with toilet paper. You're like, we were using the money if you had toilet paper. You put wads of toilet paper, your lifespan is just it's becoming shorter and shorter. So keeping you don't have to be fully strict, but you have to be knowing what your system can handle. If your system is an old system, take care of it a little bit better. Be a little bit more mindful of things. If your septic is a new one, it might be upgrades to allow you to do a little bit and have a little flex, but still, it's a system that you're running from your home. It is not a business. It's not going to a treatment center that has all the high-tech equipment. It's the equipment that you have right there. So making sure that you just take care of it, know where it's located, that helps you with your lifespan of your septic system. Septic systems, like I said earlier, when you're flushing things down the toilet, these are the things that you just want to limit. You want to keep it to that. You don't want to add other additional things when it comes to your toilet. Medicine doesn't need to be in your septic system. That causes problems. And mess with the chemistry down the line of your septic system. All those types of things, cigarettes, all those things, just don't put it in your septic system. I had a coworker of mine, she bought a new home, and her first pump out, she realized that there was a smoker in the last owner because it was all in the septic system, and they had to get it pumped out. Just think of that kind of thing. It doesn't just disappear once it gets flushed down the drain. And when you have a garbage disposal, that's another key point too. Put that in the compost, maybe put it in the trash. Don't let that go down your drain because your septic system is not spec to deal with that type of stuff. And then also, coming from Charleston, and then I went to college in Charleston, that's an expensive school. So I kind of nuzzled up with a group of friends, and the home, it's probably got 3 bedrooms. You know, it was 9 of us in there because we were just trying to make it work. If you are on a septic system and your home is spec for a 3-bedroom home for 4 individuals, you have plus individuals in there, that's running your system hard. You have to make sure that you're telling all the individuals in the home, hey, we own septic. So we're gonna have to get more inspections, more pump outs, all those types of things. And you can collectively work together to make sure it stays in good cost for you. Another thing, when you're getting your septic system maintained, these are some of the key things that you can do as a septic owner. First thing is the visual inspection. For visual inspection, you gotta know where it's located. I'm gonna keep saying that all the time. Location is key. So knowing where it's located, you can put signage and things like that. You can, knowing where it's located, you can see signs of failure. And I can show a slide later on that can give you some indications of signs of failures. And then smell test, all that type of stuff. Then getting it professionally inspected 1 to 2 years, and then a pump out 3 to 5 years. Now, like I said, if you got a house full of people, you're gonna be on the 3-year mark, because you got a lot more people running that septic, so you're gonna have to get it pumped more often. But if you're living within the specs of your home, 4 individuals, if it's one of those 3-bedroom single homes, you might only have to do it every 5 years. Or if you are doing a lot of pooping, you're gonna have to get it pumped a lot more often. So it's just what you put in is what you get out. So try to put good in, try to keep restraints on what you put in, and that way what your outcome is for your best interest. And then inspection as well. If you have problem renter, so a lot of people own multiple homes and they rent them out. If you got a problem with a renter that flushes white all the time, you get to them all the time, put that in the clause of your renter application. So I'll do it one time, but this second time it's on you. So that way you're not always dealing with the brunt of the cost of your septic system. Another thing is proper waste disposal. That's what I was talking about with the garbage disposal, is that's proper waste disposal. Put it where it needs to go. That is trash or in composting. And then efficient water use. If it's a really heavy rainstorm type of day, limit, I know it's great to do laundry during that time. I kind of think of it myself. But don't try to do 5 loads of laundry. You know, your septic system is taking the outside elements and it's bringing in your inside elements, and that may be hard for it to maintain. You can have backflow. It's a lot of things that can happen that your septic system is dealing with during those times. And then drainage protection. You don't want heavy equipment driving on your drain field. You don't want tree roots in your drain field, because there's engineered soil in there, and all those things can disrupt what that is, or it can crush it, it can break pipes, things of that nature. So having it flagged off, don't be like me at my dad's house. I had to sit there and take it a few times. But don't be like me driving all over the drain field, because it's an easy way to get out of the house kind of thing. And then keep a record. We can't remember everything under the sun, especially when it comes to our septic. Like, it could take 5 years before you get another pump out. So keeping a record lets you know, ooh, I need to look at that. It's been about 5 years. Oh, we going on 6. I need to get a pump out. Holidays are coming. Families coming to visit. I need to get a pump out. So just keeping a record just keeps things in mind. And if you see signs of failure too, because a sign might be you got a bad smell in your house, or you're not able to drain, your drains are running slow, you just mark it as a sign. You get a plumber to come out. The plumber fixes it, it comes back. If it comes back, that's septic. Because septic is something that comes, it'll just keep coming back. So that'll help you when you're dealing with failures. And then educating the household. I have 2 little ones, and my 2 little ones, when they're in the bathroom and they have a meeting at the toilet, I know it's no good for mommy. I know that there is a plan going on right there, and I need to intervene. So making sure your whole household knows what septic is. Like my dad did to me, I'm so happy. I didn't like it during the time, but I do like it now. The whole household needs to know what septic is and how to maintain it. And if you have this case going on, close that bathroom door, put clamps on the toilet, all those things, because you're going to get toys pumped out of your septic, for sure. And that sums it all up. These are some of the contributors that helped out with this. We had a septic questions after this, please ask me. I know a little bit, and I know a little bit that goes on with the contracting side as well. So if you're like, I need to get a pump out, I need to know what to do, just come and I'll help you out. That's it. And this is a QR code for our Septic website. Ellen is also part of it as well. She's part of the team, so we work together on this. Oh, keep going. These are extra slides.
Alright, there it is. Alright, good evening everyone. My name is Guthrie. I am the newly appointed Shellfish Aquaculture Extension Specialist for the South Carolina Sea Grant. Today we're giving a whole talk about oysters, the ecosystem benefits they provide, and just different harvest regulations for them. A little bit of a hard talk to give after all this septic talk, but I'll do my best. Alright, so first I'll start off by talking about how oyster reefs and farms both contribute to good water quality. So oysters are filter feeders, and each oyster has been shown to filter up to 50 gallons of water a day. And while they're sitting there filtering all that water, they're picking up different sediments, algae, and excess nutrients, which obviously help clean our waterways. Other than their direct filtering capabilities, oysters and the reefs they create also provide 3D structural benefits that support other aquatic organisms and help slow down shoreline erosion. Alright. But oysters don't just benefit from good water quality, but they can also suffer from poor water quality. So these types of poor water quality come from both human and natural sources, and for an oyster, these are stressors. And you can think about how a stressor impacts an oyster just by this budget to the right. So the only source of revenue that an oyster gets is the algae that it eats. That's the only way it can get energy. But it's got 3 different types of energy costs. So you got growth, reproduction, and maintenance. Maintenance is just the cost that it takes for that thing to stay alive. So when there are more stressors in the water, the sewage stuff we were talking about, any types of disease, the maintenance cost increases, which takes away that energy, the money, from reproduction and growth, which are obviously 2 more desirable types of factors. Not only are oysters negatively affected by poor water quality, but whatever eats them, including us humans, are also poorly affected. Like I mentioned earlier, oysters are filter feeders, so they're just picking up whatever is in the water around them. And the problem with that is that many of these oysters are consumed raw. Here in South Carolina, 25% of oysters are consumed raw. I say all that to say, don't worry too much because there are many different regulations in place to protect human health. This is what I'll get into now. So these regulations exist for both aquaculture and for wild harvest, and they really exist at every step of the game. So I got to split up from the first step, pre-harvest, to harvest, to post-harvest. So pretty much for the rest of the presentation, I'll be talking about these different steps of the game for both aquaculture and for wild harvest. So I'll start by talking a little bit about the pre-harvest stage for wild harvesting oysters. So the pre-harvest stage to me is more of a question of where can you go out and get these things. And that where question is addressed by 2 different state agencies. You have South Carolina DNR and South Carolina DES. So DNR is really concerned about where can you harvest oysters, but still maintain a healthy population of them. How can you harvest these things sustainably? DES is really more concerned about where can you get these oysters and not get sick. They're worried about it from a human health standpoint. But both of them have different designations on areas where you're able to get oysters, which I'll get into now. So I'll start with South Carolina DNR. They have 2 different types of shellfish grounds. They have state grounds and they have public grounds. So there are 20 different public grounds here in South Carolina, and these are strictly for recreational harvest. Whereas for the state shellfish grounds, those are a combination of commercial and recreational harvest. So both are allowed. There are 13 recreational harvest state shellfish grounds. Really, those kind of act more similar to a public ground. And then, so now going to DES, I mentioned how DES is concerned about where can you get it from a human health standpoint. So their classifications really have to do a lot with water quality. So the first designation is prohibited sites. So these are areas that have historically poor water quality due to factors like fecal coliform bacteria that we were talking about, really centered around areas of high population density. So on that map you can see in the top right corner, that's Charleston Harbor, all red, no good. Then you move on to your restricted sites. So these are sites that have mostly good water quality year-round, but they require a special permit through the state. Now, if you don't want to go and get this permit, you can go to a conditionally approved site. So these are sites that also have historically good water quality, but can and is subject to closures. These closures can come, after a bad storm that moves around a lot of water. It can come after a sewage leak somewhere. These are going to be the sites that you really want to check the night before you go out there and try and pick them yourself. And finally, you have the approved sites. So these are sites that historically have great water quality and are generally open. Those are going to be the ones that you can count on being open year after year. So the pre-harvest considerations for oyster farming are pretty similar. You know, it's just considerations on where you can go out and put an oyster farm. I'm not going to get into it too much, but basically it's just a stricter process, obviously because it's a farm and it's going to be there long term. Alright, so here is the harvest stage for wild harvest. So the harvest stage to me is more of a question of when can you go out and get these things. So here in South Carolina, the season is open approximately from October 1st through May 27th. So you may notice, okay, that's during the colder months of the year. So you may be wondering, why can't I eat oysters, wild oysters, during these warmer months? A lot of that has to do with this bad bacteria called Vibrio. So Vibrio is this bacteria that is present and common in most estuaries across the United States. However, Vibrio is a problem because it is a leading contributor of shellfish-borne sickness and illness on a year-to-year basis. And getting sick from Vibrio isn't just something they can pop a NyQuil and get over that night. This stuff can hospitalize you and even causes death. So back to the original question, why can't I eat oysters during the summer? So I mentioned how Vibrio is just natural and present in the environment year-round, but its abundance increases during the summer months. So for a wild oyster that is just sitting there exposed to the natural environment with very little manipulation, this wild oyster will get higher levels of Vibrio during the summer months to a level that's unsafe for you to eat. However, oyster farms and farmers have a technique to manipulate their oysters to get around this, which I'll talk about now. You guys have noticed, going to raw bars during the summer, you start seeing oysters for sale during the summer. Okay, what's up with that? So, farmed oysters are oftentimes grown in floating cages. So, the thing about these floating cages, a lot of other benefits in terms of growing these oysters, but one unique aspect about the floating cage is that farmers can have it flip down so that the oysters are submerged underwater, but then they can also flip them back up so these oysters are drying in the air. Now, oyster farmers will dry them in a process called desiccation. Oyster farmers will desiccate their oysters and their gear to get rid of biofouling, and that's shown on the left. These are all the other aquatic organisms that are just present in the environment, and that if the oyster farmer can get rid of them, will lead to a superior, more marketable product. So, oyster farmers will commonly desiccate, throughout the year, but let's just say an oyster farmer is desiccating once a week for 18 hours. They have a regulation. Before they get into regulation, while these oysters are drying in the air, the problem is that the Vibrio spikes in the oysters, so versus when they are submerged. So farmers have to dry them in order to get a marketable product, but while they're drying, this Vibrio is increasing. Now there's been many studies done across the US in many different oyster farms, many different locations that shows that 14 days of flipping those oysters back down underwater gets rid of Vibrio back to a level that is safe for human consumption. So here in South Carolina, this 14 days of resubmergence is a regulation that DNR enforces so that oyster farmers have to dump these oysters back in the water for 14 days straight before they're able to sell them to market. Now, this allows farmed oysters to have summer harvest and be sellable during the summer. Now, I want you guys to think about a wild oyster. So these wild oysters, with these big tides that South Carolina has, often gets 2 low tides, 2 high tides a day, right? So for the vast majority of those oysters in our waterways, they're getting dried out about twice a day. And there never is more than 12 hours straight where that oyster isn't getting dried out. So because of that lack of manipulation that you can do with those wild oysters, those things will have a high level of Vibrio during the summertime when it's present in the environment and they're constantly being dried. With this farmed oyster, though, through farming, they're able to keep them submerged. So they're able to kind of manipulate that in order to keep Vibrio down. That's why you can eat farmed oysters during the summer, but you can't eat the wild ones. All right, so now let's think about some post-harvest considerations. So what are you going to do with these things after you get them? A lot of these mandates are written down in this beefy 100-page document done through the National Shellfish Sanitation Program, which is kind of coordinated through several different federal agencies, but also edited down at the state level just to meet the needs of each state. A lot of these kind of ideas and regulations are really for oyster farming, but some of these principles have merit in wild harvest too. So the first one I'll talk about is just to ice them down. When you go out and pick oysters, no matter the time of year, I highly recommend you bring a cooler with some ice in there. And really, you want to ice them down as soon as you take them. And you do that for the same reason that you cool down meat. You want to slow down the rotting process, and you want to slow down the spread of disease. Oyster farmers also have to provide a harvest tag with every single batch of oysters they produce, which just provides a level of backtrackability and accountability for the product further down the line. Even when you're wild harvesting, I recommend you do the same. It's always nice to have that level of accountability. All right, so just wrapping it up, today we talked about how there are many different regulations in place and enforced by, not just state agencies, but also these federal agencies too. These regulations more or less pertain to the where, when, and how you can get oysters, and that's to protect the end consumer against sewage, toxins, and natural disease that are just present in the natural environment. Now, if you do plan on going out there and wild harvesting oysters, I really recommend that you pay close attention to both closure maps. So you want to look at DNR and DESs, and you want to make sure that your area is in a good in an approved site for both of those agencies. This really keeps you safe from two things. It keeps you safe from getting sick from the disease, but it also keeps you safe from getting a ticket from DNR, which is never fun. So I want to encourage you guys to continue to eat farmed oysters with confidence during the summer. I talked about how farmed oysters are manipulated in a way where they are safe from Vibrio and still are a safe and quality product during the summer months when wild harvest oysters are not. Now you may be a little bit wondering, okay, how can I tell the difference? These farmed oysters will oftentimes, and I'm not going to say always, but oftentimes be in singles, right? So these are singles that you would see on ice at the raw bar. They'll oftentimes be clean of biofouling with these farmers being able to desiccate them and dry them. Versus wild clusters, or wild harvest oysters are oftentimes in clusters. A lot of those oysters will be oblong, have different barnacles and stuff, so you can almost visually tell. And the final piece of encouragement that I have for you guys is to just try and get more oysters out in the water. If you're interested, you can volunteer with South Carolina DNR's South Carolina Oyster Recycling and Enhancement Program. And if you are a waterfront property owner, you can consider building a living shoreline instead of putting in a bulkhead. It'll protect your land from erosion the same way, and it'll probably attract more redfish, trout, flounder, put them right in your backyard. So, with that, I think Zach will be talking a little bit more about these living shorelines, and thanks so much.
Awesome. All right, everybody do me a favor, stand up. All right, so my name is Zach Snyder. I'm with Shoreline Restoration Group. We're a company that started in 2022. South Carolina legislature passed a law that homeowners could put in living shorelines on their property. That's what motivated us to start our company. Previously, only DNR could put these living shorelines on their property. So we started this company, and now we do all kinds of ecological restoration work. We're not really a landscaper, we're not really a contractor, we're somewhere in between. And we feel what we think a nice niche of people that really care about the environment. And the work we do cleans up the environment. We believe in nature-based solutions. So what I tell people is when we put something in, the day we install it is the worst it will ever be. Because nature has a way of fixing itself and doing itself. And so it gets better every single day. Unlike bulkheads and gray infrastructure, the day you put them in is as good as it'll be, and they're eventually going to erode and wear out. Whereas our stuff gets better over time. So we do we're doing some floating wetland research with some universities. We do a lot of aggressive invasive species management, cattails, tallow, fragmites, things like that. I'm going to talk a little bit about living shorelines. And we put in rain gardens. We built a beaver dam for some nuns, for king's trees. So whatever engineers can draw up, we'll build it. If we're interested in it, and it kind of fits our mission. But we'll start with saltwater since we are on Edisto. So a living shoreline, essentially what Josh talked about, is a way to build an oyster reef. I kind of use them interchangeably, oyster reef or living shoreline. But you see a lot of this, and we get a lot of calls from clients where the shoreline was out here a few years ago, and now it's eroding very fast, right? And so for water quality purposes, that's bad. For turbidity, that's bad. A lot of bad things going on there. And so what we do is we can help you guys get the permits because it is a very red tape process to get the permits and get the engineer stamps and everything. But we can do all that. And then we also install the living shoreline, and we also help with the compliance piece after you install the living shoreline. So we help with all that. So this is a living shoreline, and to my knowledge, it's the first private living shoreline built in the state of South Carolina, and it was here on Edisto. So we're super excited about that. We installed this one in June of last year. We made these, we call them modified wire reef cages. They kind of look like crab traps. We build these in-house. These are not cement coated, but we dip them in cement. And what that does is it provides a structure for these oysters, the baby oysters, as they're floating through the water. They're looking for a substrate or something hard that they can attach to. So when these oysters, what's going to happen eventually is oysters are going to be attracted to this, and there'll be a few oysters here. And then over time, we get bigger and bigger oysters. Then that recruits more oysters, and it perpetuates itself. And over time, this right here, within a couple of years, will be in a solid oyster bar there. And what happens is with the water and all the sediment, it actually gets trapped behind here. And so it actually, instead of eroding your property, it will actually build your property back up. And then a couple of years down the road, you can come back in and plant spartina grass behind the oyster reef. And so not only are you cleaning the water, you're rebuilding your property, you're creating habitat and recreational opportunities as well. So if that's something y'all are interested in, we'd love to help you guys out with that. We do the modified wire reefs, and we also do the bag shell type reefs that DNR does. These are quite a bit more expensive because shell is really hard to find. But we do put these in, and it really depends on the type of substrate and the energy of the water. If you have a lot of boat traffic, it's really high tides. So there's a couple different parameters we look at and decide what type of reef we need to put on the property. So we do that on saltwater properties. We did this project a few years ago. I guess the previous homeowner just hated trees and marsh plants, so they cut everything down and sprayed chemicals. So we got the permits and went in and replanted it with native plants that are going to do well in the salt marsh. This is a project we're about to start. This contractor built a dock, and obviously when they were building the dock, you go in there and you walk through the plug mud, and you mess up a lot of the plant communities here, especially spartina and black needle rush. So we're going to go in with paddle boards, and our crew really loves it because they get the paddle board out there, but we'll go with the paddle boards and plant spartina where it got kind of messed up previously, so we don't disturb it as we plant. It's really important. We're also trying to talk them into putting a living shoreline in right here, or a vegetative buffer, which I'll talk about in just a second. So we do saltwater work. We also do a lot of freshwater work. And so just like the other speakers talked about, when you have water that just runs into the pond or creeks or streams, it's carrying all types of bacteria and pollutants and antifreeze and whatever's on the surface. It's going right into the water. Turf is really, really bad at filtering this out because it's so short, and turf has a really short root system. So what we like to do is put in these vegetative buffers. We talked about water quality already. We think the solution is to mimic nature. If you go around the swamps and marshes, look at the plants that are growing in those areas. That's what's supposed to be there, not turf. Okay? And so we buy and use a lot of the plants that are native to South Carolina, to these systems, both freshwater and saltwater. And we try to, in our designs, it doesn't look like a landscape. We try to make it look like what it would naturally look like if we just left it out, right? So why native plants? I talked about turf. Here is the roots of turf. And these are the roots of native plants. Okay? So if you think about it being on saltwater or even freshwater, I got these roots that are this long, and then I got a buffer that's maybe 10 foot wide. I have this matrix of roots that are just holding all that soil. So they're not letting it erode into the water. Another thing it's doing is if I got plants that are this tall, water can't rush into the water. It's slowing that water down. So when water gets slowed down, water has a chance to infiltrate into the soil. The soil is magical because the soil can pull all those pollutants and toxins out of that stormwater. Okay? So these buffers not only stabilize the soil, but they clean it. And again, I told y'all the day we install it, it's the worst it's going to be. these plants, when you plant them, because they're native and they're supposed to grow where we're planting them, they're gonna only get better at day 2, year 2, and year 10. And so it's gonna work and function better over time. This is a picture just kind of showing that. This is the roots of turf. These are very young freshwater aquatic plants that we plant. You can already see the root system, the difference of it, okay? So this is a buffer that we installed. We work in a lot of HOAs on stormwater ponds, but this is a mixed species buffer. We like to use a lot of different species because they all have different functions and they look different. And if this dies, then these are eventually going to kind of take over that area. So we kind of spread our risk out there. Vegetative buffers, you don't have to cut as much grass. You don't have to worry about falling in to the pond or the stream. You don't have to use herbicides. You don't have to use fertilizer there. These things are actually very efficient at picking up all of that stuff before it goes in the water. So, but these are some examples of what we've done, and then it just looks good, right? I think, turf mowed to the edge with like erosion underneath it, it just doesn't do it for me. But this is awesome. We have a lot of pollinators, we have a lot of lizards, and it's just full of life. What we've also seen with this is a lot of dragonflies. You know what dragonflies do? They eat mosquitoes. So that's a huge benefit. Now we're not a mosquito control company, but you do get some mosquito predation. Talk about wildlife habitat. You build it, they will come. Ellen's going to talk about rain gardens. We have installed some rain gardens. That's kind of a before picture. They got a lot of flooding in this backyard. And then this is the after picture. And this will hold about 4 inches of water during a storm event. So it was kind of funny, we put this in, and as soon as we put it in, we had a hurricane, we got 10 inches of rain, and it flooded, and they're like, it's not working. And I'm like, it's not supposed to hold a foot of rain. About 4 inches we could have held. And then we left a nice golf cart path for the kids. So. Then I talked about some of the invasive species management we do. Our folks that work with us are highly skilled scientists and a lot of biology majors. What we do, we don't just spray and pray. We do a lot of species identification in really sensitive areas where we don't want to kill this, this, or this, or any of these native plants. We just go in and target the invasive species. That way the natives can outgrow them and do what they're supposed to do. So that's it. If y'all have any questions, I feel like I have a fire hose and I just blasted y'all with water. But I'll be around if y'all have any questions. Thank y'all.
All right, I'm last. So I'll probably give this talk in about an hour. Let's see if I can do it in 5 minutes. So, all right, just so you know, my name is Edisto Island. I am a Water Resources Extension Agent down in Beaufort County. I also manage the Low Country Stormwater Partners, which is why you see that big dolphin on the orange table over there. Very similar to be with the Ashley Cooper. It is a partnership between the municipalities, the county government, and several other partners. But big question, what is a rain garden? Very simply put, a rain garden is a landscape depression, so a small bit of a dip in the land, that is meant to collect, store, and infiltrate stormwater, so rainwater, so that the pollution that it might be carrying, whether that's excess fertilizers from your yard, bird poop from your roof, whatever it may be, it gets a chance to use, as Zach said, the soil to absorb and filter that pollution before it can head downstream. So I designed this program mostly to kind of talk about the major things I get asked about rain gardens, and also the things I think you should know if you're considering one. First myth that I usually encounter is that rain gardens breed mosquitoes. They do not, because they're not meant to store water. They're meant to catch it and slow it down, but every drop of water that's in that rain garden should be underground in less than 72 hours. Guess how long it takes a mosquito larva to hatch into an adult?
73 hours.
72 hours precisely. So a rain garden should not have standing water long enough to breed mosquitoes. Rain gardens are expensive. This one's kind of a maybe. The initial investment can be expensive. You gotta dig out the ground a little bit, you gotta add some compost. We got plenty of sand here, we don't need to add that. But you're gonna also wanna buy the plants and you're gonna wanna buy some mulch. So that's gonna be kind of your initial investment. However, over time, they're beneficial, they're long lasting, they can last decades, as long as they are maintained, and you don't really need a lot of maintenance in them. Now, granted, low maintenance does not mean no maintenance. It means low maintenance. So there's not going to be fertilizers, there's not going to be pesticides. Most things is just going to be adding mulch every other year or so, and making sure you're keeping it weeded. So nobody knows anything about rain gardens. I can't find any information on it. Hello. So I'm here, however, I'm actually end my presentation with a whole list of places you can go online to also find out more. But I'll say it right now, clemson.edu/raingarden, the easiest URL to remember, has a ton of information, including a whole PDF guide on how to site, design, and build your own. All right, so benefits of the rain garden. So, as I said, they're a low maintenance garden. Because they're using native plants, we're not really having to put a lot of inputs into the garden. This is not a prized rose bed. This is something that is going to work. Those native plants are going to do their job, they're going to grow, they're going to look beautiful, and they're actually going to help you with some wildlife. I have seen rain gardens designed to attract pollinators. I've seen rain gardens designed to help feed birds. And they're going to be beautiful. Look at all these native plants, they're gorgeous. This is also a smaller rain garden. You can see, very pretty. However, the ones that I like to talk about is that you reduce stormwater runoff pollution. As I said, you're collecting that rainwater, and water is not wet, it's sticky. Water forms drops with itself, that's what's sticking to itself. But when you stick your hand in the bucket of water and you pull your hand out, water is sticking to you, making your hand wet. Water is sticky, it is not wet itself, and it likes to stick to tons of different pollutants that happen in your yard, happen in the road, happen on your roof. They also help with erosion problems. Because you're slowing down water or you're infiltrating it in one place, it doesn't have that energy to run down another bit of a slope and just erode that. It also helps with poor drainage, once again, because you're trying to infiltrate water above the areas of poor drainage. That gives areas of poor drainage time to dry out. So can you have a rain garden? It depends. Rain gardens have very specific site conditions that you're going to be looking for. So you're going to want to put your rain gardens between the source, so where your water is coming from, and the destination. So whether that's a ditch, whether that's a pond, whether that's a storm drain, you're going to want to put the rain garden in between those two areas. You want it perpendicular to slopes. Basically, if you've got a slope running this way, and your rain garden is running the same way, you're not slowing down the water at all. You're getting a really pretty luge run for it. But if you put it perpendicular, it's time, it slows down, you can seep in. Also, you do need the space for it. Rain gardens tend to have to be about 20 to 50% of the size of the area that they're draining. If you have quick draining soils and sandy soils, and you're not really trying to concentrate it from a gutter, you're trying to do sheet flow, you can get smaller rain gardens. But if you have heavy, compact clay soils, you're getting it from one spot on a roof, you're going to want to make your rain garden bigger. It's better to oversize than undersize rain gardens. You need to keep rain gardens 10 feet away from the foundations and 25 feet away from septic systems. Because you're putting so much water into the ground, yes, you can crack your foundation with it. Yes, you can overflow your drain field with it. You gotta give it the space to work. And you also want to avoid area under trees, basically because nothing really grows under trees. They have a dense network of feeder roots that don't allow for other plants to grow all that well. It's not a space for a rain garden. Also, you want to avoid areas where your water table is less than 18 inches deep. Once again, we're planting a depression, so it means we got to dig into the soil, and if you dig 18 inches down and the hole's already filling with water, that's not a good place for a rain garden. Consider a wetland garden or a bog garden instead. And then you want to always perk test your potential sites first, meaning you dig yourself a hole outside of the holes you're talking in, you fill it with water, and you wait to see how long it drains. If it drains within 24 hours, go ahead, you've got a great site for a rain garden. If it takes over 24 hours to drain, you're not going to want to put a rain garden there. And pro tip, don't do this just after a rain, and don't do it in times of drought, because you will get different answers with that perk test. Plant selection. We use only native plants in our rain gardens, or we only recommend using native plants in the rain gardens, because no fertilizer is really needed for them. They're already adapted adapted to your local conditions. You're not gonna need nearly as much pesticide. And honestly, the only problem with using native plants in rain gardens is they do so well, you need to divide them and you have to find other places to put native plants or give them to your friends. So free plants. But big thing, no annuals or trees. You don't want to be constantly replanting your rain garden because you want that soil to stay nice and fluffy so it can drain. You don't want to be constantly in the rain garden. And you don't want trees because, as I said, nothing really grows well under trees. So just as a couple of different ideas for rain garden designs, this one's a full sun. It has plants like butterfly milkweed, switchgrass, white coneflower, blue flag iris, blue mistflower. For woodland grass, this is more for a shaded area, because yes, you can design them for shade. You can have things like columbine, cardinal flower, tussock sedge, Solomon seal, sweet flag, cinnamon fern. And then these, I know I'm going a mile a minute. So these are actually plants that I either planted in a rain garden or are present in rain gardens in Beaufort County. Things like sweetgrass, dwarf palmettos, beautyberries, swamp rose, swamp mallow, dwarf yellow palm lily. Bushes are fine, shrubs are fine, trees are not. Wax myrtles, sea oats, swamp sunflower, blue mistflower, and the list goes on and on. This is probably the slide you want to take a picture of. This is where you can find out more about rain gardens. We actually do have a master rain gardener course that does a letter of completion, so it's fully online for homeowners who are interested in learning more. But the Carolina Rain Garden Initiative, that is the clemson.edu/rain garden. That's where you can get a guide to how to install rain garden. There's links to a 17-part YouTube video series on the installation of a rain garden. And then, as always, you can always look for the HGIC, that's Home Queen Garden Information Center. And then the South Carolina Native Plant Society is an excellent resource to find out what native plants will work well in your yard and to find native plant nurseries in your area. So this is my contact information, and with that, I'm done.
All right, we all give our speakers a round of applause. That was awesome. That was fantastic. We are running a little bit up on time though, but if anyone has any burning questions to ask our presenters here today, please ask away.
I have a question. Septic tank.
Yes.
I'm getting ready to have a septic tank put in,
Okay.
and kitchen one. What do I need not to do in the kitchen? You said oil.
Yeah, fats, oils, and greases. So when you are dealing with anything that can solidify in a process of going down the drain, you don't want that in there. First, you clog at your drain. You can't get the water high enough to get it to run all the way down. And then you're going to fill up your septic that way as well. So you just want to avoid fats, oils, and greases. And if you're thinking about installing a garbage disposal, don't. Or if you do, there are some newer ones. They're a little higher price, but they separate the food out and allow water to drain through. And then you can take that garbage disposal food and put it in trash or in a compost. But they are higher in cost. It's still new on the research of that. They have to streamline that to make it more compact.
Thank you. I did not know that.
Yes, ma'am. And I got caps and lids that you can put on the can and things to collect your oils and fats and things instead of running it down the drain. That was an old school method. My grandma taught me that too. I was like, no, grandma, I have to go back. That ain't it, grandma. We gotta make a change.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
When did your study be done?
Yeah, sorry, so we started, I realized afterwards I didn't say that. We started last summer. We originally were gonna be sampling for a full calendar year, but I think we're gonna go for, so we're sampling every month. We're gonna go through next February or March. And then we'll be done and analyzing the data.
How reliant on federal money is the future program going to be, a 4-year program and 5-year program? kind of scary what's going on with what's going on.
So for our 2024 program, we about 45–50% of that was funded by the EPA. That was federally funded. The rest was all privately funded. So looking forward to 2026, I'm still going to try for EPA funding here in May. We'll see if that materializes or not, but that was a very large linchpin in the funding source there. So we may need to make up that slack somewhere else. We may come back in 2026 with a much smaller program, and that's when we'll be relying upon research to be able to make the most impact for the funding that we have available. We may have to do a cost share program. We may not be able to do full system replacements like we were able to fund previously.
People that are depending on your septic program, because the program was cut off because of no grants available, are they still on your list?
Yep, everyone who's on the waiting list is still on the waiting list, and they still got first billing for when we come back and hopefully have more funding here in 2026.
Okay.
And selfishly, I'm going to be passing this around. Please don't feel obligated to sign it. This is, if you want more information about the upcoming research project. Oh, put it by the front door.
If there's no more questions, then I think we're ready to adjourn for tonight. Please don't forget to grab some snacks. We've got leftovers. Don't forget to grab some snacks.